There's a race between many of the big tech players to be the first to achieve AGI, and then potentially artificial superintelligence.
This hippy dippy lab in San Francisco is going to build superintelligence. I'm like, what? No.
For the first time in 5 billion years that life has been on Earth, we are now inventing tools that invent.
So Demi's almost warned Elon and like, hey, just be aware of this. We're building something. And, is it okay that one giant corporation owns this magnitude of technology? We have no clue. Like, we're summoning a literal god into this world. Let's have some humility. They're like almost setting money on fire to warn the world about the potential dangers. It's kind of naive to think about that the government is not involved with all of these interests.
When they're right and they're making like ungodly amounts of money because they've got the stock market edge that nobody's ever seen before, which company would grow?
Well, as many of you know, we are living through an intelligence explosion right now. The age of artificial intelligence is upon us. We are rapidly moving towards artificial general intelligence. There are a whole host of giant players in the big tech space, even at the sovereign level. There's a race between China and the United States. There's a race within the United States between many of the big tech players to be the first to achieve AGI, and then potentially artificial superintelligence behind that. But today we're going to focus really on this race to AGI. And so I have with me Wes Roth and Dylan Curious. They each have their own fantastic YouTube channels that are focused on covering the AI space. And then they also have a new podcast together. And they've had some amazing guests, one of which, if you are familiar with this space, you will recognize immediately. And that was Nick Bostrom, who is an incredibly influential voice in the realm of thinking about what happens in a post-AGI world. And so they had a phenomenal conversation about that. And so I wanted to bring them on to explore this idea of this arms race that we have going on for AGI. And I'd like to spend the day looking at the individual players, some of the axes on which they are all competing, and then dig into where does this race look like it's going as far as who are the most exciting players that may end up taking this prize. And so that's what we're going to spend today doing. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be here. Super excited.
Awesome. So we'll start the questions off and just look at the overall AGI race. What do you think is at stake? And I think, Wes, I'll hand this one over to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, like you mentioned, we did talk to Nick Bostrom and a number of other people that are kind of really watching the space carefully, including people that are ex-directors at Google. And one thing, it does seem like a lot of people are worried about the closeness of AGI to ASI, right? And of course, I think that the blog Wait But Why did a great job of explaining it for people that are familiar with it. They had Tim Urban, is that the name?
Yep.
Yeah. So he did a great job back in 2016, 2015 called The AI Revolution Parts 1 and 2. And he was, I think, just really illustrated this concept so beautifully, and this idea that, if you think about the computer intelligence getting better and better, and we've always talked about like, oh, when is it going to sort of arrive to the human level? And so he illustrates it like a train station, and the human level intelligence machine and intelligence train is going to roll in and it's going to stop at the human level intelligence station. We're going to be like, oh, it's here, it's our equal. And he's like, nope, that's not at all how it's going to happen. We're going to be standing there looking at the platform, looking at the train and going like, it's coming in pretty fast. And then it just blows past us in one split second. So it's going to be at our intelligence level for a split second. And because of that exponential improvement, it's going to go past us. And so Nick Bostrom was one of the people, like just the recent person that we talked to, that he's like, he doesn't think there's going to be a huge gap between AGI and ASI. And same thing with, Daniel Cocotello. We talked to Adam Binksmith, who they've worked together a little bit. We've talked to and covered a lot of other people that are saying the same thing. So this idea of recursive self-improvement, Sam Altman referred to it as, we're in the larval stages of recursive self-improvement. Elon Musk has talked about it. So Demis Hassabis, this isn't like some fringe conspiracy theory. Like once they get to a certain point, the machine intelligence gets to a certain point, stuff shifts fast. So I think that's what's at stake. And the reality is we don't know what that looks like. We just don't. So.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, like what's at stake. And I think it's as much as you could imagine in some sense. I mean, in fact, you should even think it's way more than you can imagine, because like the whole concept of AGI or ASI is that for the first time in the 5 billion years that life has been on Earth, like we are now inventing tools that invent. Like I don't see it the same as nuclear weapons. I don't see it the same as even a rocket ship, because those things are complex. Those things are complicated, but they're not complex. Like complexity itself, and if there's an arrangement of matter in a way that can actually generalize and interpret, it doesn't feel like anything else. Like this isn't programmed, this is learning, and we've only had biological life on Earth to even compare. And just in the biological realm, the diversity on Earth is unimaginable. And the types of intelligence that you see in different animals is incredible. And it's very, poorly known by the average person. But to then soup that thing up into 10 Costco-sized warehouses and put together way more than 80 billion neurons and not have it constrained by natural evolution, what's at stake? It might be anything. I mean, it could be the Fermi paradox. It could be the solution to everything we've ever imagined. It could be life that looks so different from what life looks like now that we don't want to live in it, or we're dying to live in it. And I don't even know how to imagine it after probably more than 10 or 15 years at this point.
Yeah, I mean, those are obviously all of relatively positive outcomes in the space of possible outcomes that, a lot of people are worried that we are actually inventing a technology that will be the end of humanity and the end of civilization as well, which, I think that we can't leave off the space of possibilities. But as Elon says, I think I tend to agree with him that the majority probability, is that we will end up in a positive future. And so we'll kind of leave the endless discussions of P-Doom off the side of the table for today and focus mainly on the idea that, okay, hey, as long as, this doesn't end up being the end of humanity and civilization completely, and that there is a future for us, who are the players that are in the best position to actually bring something like artificial general intelligence into existence, and what are the key ingredients that each of these people have to bring to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and P-Doom is important, and we're certainly not dismissing the catastrophic risks. I think it's important to understand that things are going to get serious, things are going to get rough, and not just existential risk. I mean, there's tons of issues whenever we have this massive upheaval like this. Things get bumpy. So, so when Elon's talking about an X risk, ending humanity, stuff like that, that's not a joke. That's not sci-fi. We have to be careful here. We just don't know. We don't have any prior information about how does superintelligence behave. We have no clue. Like, we're summoning a literal god into this world. Let's have some humility. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I'm an optimistic person. I tend to think that technology improves lives. And I think that's very well documented. And of course, people will always show, where technology is bad, and they're but overall it improves lives, improves humanity. So in terms of how the whole thing started is, Google buys Demis Hassabis's company. Him and Mustafa Suleyman, I don't know if people realize that he was the other co-founder. So he's over at Microsoft AI. Demis is over at Google AI, Google DeepMind. And all of a sudden, and I remember this because I have a lot of people in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, a lot of people working for some of these big tech companies that I know. Some were family members, some were very close friends. And so these rumors start kind of slowly diffusing through the space where they're like, Google's going to build AI. You know what I mean? This was, I don't know when, but it was way before anybody was like really talking about it. But there, of course, what are the first, I think the first emails between Elon Musk, Sam Altman, I mean, those were like 2013, 2014. And then OpenAI was formed 2016. I might be getting it the years a little bit off, but it was like a lot earlier than a lot of people, I think, were thinking about some of this stuff. And so the rumor, again, we don't know a lot of this, some of the emails were leaked. So, but kind of like looking at everything, it looks like Demis wrote Elon saying, hey, I'm a little bit concerned. Google is like this corporate entity. It's huge. I'm concerned about AGI being used strictly for corporate interests. So Demis almost warned Elon and like, hey, just be aware of this. Like, we're building something, and is it okay that one giant corporation owns this magnitude of technology? You know what I mean? And so that's when Sam Altman appears, right? And he's like, oh, we can build all this stuff too, as a counterbalance to Google. And
it almost makes you wonder if Demis was actually, sorry to cut in there, but no. I know that Elon specifically was able to pull Ilya Sutskever away from DeepMind and away from Demis Hassabis at roughly this point in time that you're talking about to come and join OpenAI. And I think, without Ilya and his time at OpenAI, it's very doubtful that OpenAI would be in the position or even close to the position that it's in today. And so, it just sparked a realization that, there may be something to, Demis's worry about that being contained with inside of Google that led to Ilya leaving as well.
Yeah, and every single person. I mean, look at X.AI had Igor Babushkin, who is one of the main people at X.AI. So as soon as they got Grok to a certain point, Igor is out, and he's going to be focusing on AI safety. Daniel Kokotalo, he said that like 90% of his family's net worth was because of OpenAI stock. He put it all on the line to be the whistleblower, right? Because in the contract, they said, oh, we're going to take your equity away if you say anything negative about OpenAI. He still went up. So you got to understand that very smart people whose entire could be millionaires and billionaires, in Ilya's case, billionaires, right? They're saying no to tens of millions, hundreds of millions, $1 billion+ to go, we got to be careful about this stuff. And I mean, Demis Hassabis, if that rumor is true, I mean, warning Elon, right, a potential competitor, you got to understand that these people, because some people say, oh, they're just marketing hype. They're like almost setting money on fire to warn the world about the potential dangers. So just want to put that out there. Yeah. So that's how OpenAI got started. And of course, the beginnings were different. This is where a lot of people are fighting over it. Like, should they be allowed to go from a nonprofit to something else? Did they betray their original goal? It's a little bit fuzzy in a sense that everybody figured out that they need capital to build compute. And that's exactly the pivot that they made. And people are blaming them like, oh, you aligned with Microsoft. Well, they needed the money to, you know what I'm saying? Like, how else do you raise billions and tens of billions of dollars? I'm not taking anybody's side. I'm sort of able to see both sides of the argument, I think. So that's OpenAI. They aligned with Microsoft. By the way, I think today, as we're recording this, Microsoft's models are popping in the LM arena. I think rumors, take this with a grain of salt. By the time this recording is out, this might be like, debunked. So I don't know. But, there's some chatter that Microsoft is launching their own models. Like, not OpenAI, Microsoft, right? So could be big, for people that are investing. I would look at this. This might be a pretty big shift. So we have Google, the original person, the original entity. They kind of dropped the ball. OpenAI just swooped up, had their ChatGPT moment, and just pushed this thing out to the world. Now Google is catching up. Anthropic Dario was part of OpenAI. It's like everything started here and then just like split. Everybody somehow kind of connected to the center in one way or another. And then a lot of the Chinese models, by the way, the little sort of open secret is that a lot of these models use knowledge distillation from each other. So it's like when one person built the model, everybody else is able to catch up by sort of taking data from that model. That's exactly what happened with the Chinese models. And there's a gentleman online, Sam Parr, who has the intelligent quotient EQ bench, right? That kind of points it out. Like you can see the Chinese models, whose models they've sort of replicated, right? So before it was OpenAI, now it's Gemini 2.5 Pro. Just interesting interesting tidbit. So the point is, there's a lot of convergence now, right? So once the best of the best releases their models, everybody else quickly catches up. So it's kind of a good thing, right? Because it's not going to be Google controlling everything or one company controlling everything, right? But like you said, yeah. So the next sort of big things is talent, compute, algorithmic progress, although that seems to be diffusing quite rapidly. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
And then data, I think, would be the other dimension as well.
So data is interesting. Let's come back to data. Let's say data is one important part. Let's put an asterisk next to it and come back to it. But yeah, Dylan, sorry, we want to get Dylan's take on this too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question because when you say who are the players, you do usually have to add that little thing at the end. Like if you really think robotics and real world things are going to be the ultimate end game, then there are companies that look a little bit more behind and can probably distill information out from the other companies. But, yeah, Google is the most interesting to me just because it did seem like they were so far ahead in the first place. And it does seem like they might be the only competitor to NVIDIA in a certain sense because of their competitor to CUDA, right? Like NVIDIA has got ways to link all of these things together. And almost everyone else has to pay a huge fee to do that, including Elon is paying that. He's got the money for it. But there's a lot of
Dylan,
yep.
Just for the portion of the audience that probably doesn't know my audience is going to probably split between people who know exactly what you are talking about when you say that CUDA, the competitive mode that CUDA is for NVIDIA and the CUDA tax that everyone pretty much besides Google is paying and those who aren't. So if you wouldn't mind just like explaining a little bit what that is.
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm not too much of an expert on it. I couldn't go into the kind of detail like James Doma or someone could. But basically, when you have GPUs, they're powerful. They can process math, and you can chain them together in big chunks. These are like what you're getting when you're getting a data center. And the way that they keep the data, I'm going to say parallel, like the way they keep moving, flowing data is something where NVIDIA has invented and pioneered and owns much of the architecture that makes these things scale because the chips themselves isn't the end game. And Google early on saw this and didn't want to pay that fee and had developed tensor processing units, which are little chips that kind of do what GPUs do. And they also built their own chipset, like these giant racks can communicate in their own way. And that gave them a huge leg up. And they were doing that before everyone else. And even though OpenAI showed up and was like, wow, this transformer architecture can do these amazing things with large language models, we have to train them on something, they were pretty far behind. And Microsoft, as much as they built out for their Azure cloud and even Amazon Web Services, they were thinking about cloud services not as a lot of GPUs put together. They were thinking about it as people who wanted to run all sorts of like databases and things. So they didn't really build one either. So Google and NVIDIA on the layer underneath the GPUs are actually quite a bit ahead. And that kind of might be part of what I would predict, that whoever is sort of competing in these two spaces like might end up kind of being able to scale in ways that other people can't. But basically, yeah. So going back to the players, I think there's groupings that will have to happen if this is just about scale. OpenAI they're trying to put together Oracle and Microsoft and whoever else will kind of have them. So they've kind of got this hodgepodge of things that they're putting together. Elon has his own kind of interesting way of just paying his way out of some of these problems and innovating in a way where he can get people to work together day and night, and he can solve energy problems in ways others can't because he gets more creative. So yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, it depends on if you want to talk about just scaling architecture, because that's only one way to look at it. The major players might be some of the smaller people who are coming up with new architectures. There's some of the people who have data to do the most interesting things with the models from other people. So there's a lot out there.
Go down that short rabbit trail just briefly on like of the smaller players that are trying to come up with something like wild card players that have a shot at, maybe they're working on something that's crazy, they're tiny, but if it works, maybe it catapults them into a big position. Who are some of those players in your mind? Like, who are you interested in and watching that might actually be able to achieve something like that?
I'll throw one out there and then I'll let you answer, Wes. But I think Safe Superintelligence is like a sleeper. I think you should be kind of watching them because we don't know a ton about what that company is doing, but we know that it has some of the most senior people in the AI space working on it. They're clearly doing something that doesn't require as much around it. Like you don't have to, since there's no product for us to use, you don't have all of the headaches that OpenAI and the other companies do about keeping it safe for every person to use. It's not about a productivity tool. It's strictly about intelligence. So they can make architectural changes. The world wouldn't know about them. They do have massive money and massive compute, not at the same scale as some of the bigger people we talked about. But I got a feeling if behind the scenes they were like, look, here's something we've discovered because we're running experiments no one else is about true intelligence. And it's not capped, it's not safe or whatever. It's just true intelligence and it could change the world. And we just need some more money to experiment and scale with it. So Safe Superintelligence might pop up, but I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Wes.
Yeah, absolutely. Safe Superintelligence, thinky machines, as it's referred to, which is Murati's company. So Thinking Machines is the name of the company, but I think they couldn't get that Twitter handle. So they got Thinky Machines. I'm like, call it Thinky Machines. That sounds great. Very memorable. So not 100% sure what she's working on. There's some whispers. Same thing with Ilya, SSI, Safe Superintelligence, some whispers. Anthropic, of course, is doing some great stuff. It's one of the smaller companies in terms of scale, but Dario Amodei was on a podcast recently, it's obvious like he's in high spirits. He's just like yelling and ranting. I mean, I kind of love that guy, but he's like, these capital allocators, right? So the capital venture people, if you have a company that can do the same thing with 10x less capital than another company, right, that can do, the same thing requiring 10x more capital, like, unless you're an idiot, you're going to invest in the company that can do it with 10x less capital. You know what I mean? He's like, unfortunately, a lot of the venture capital guys, some of them are idiots. So I don't know who he's talking about because I don't follow that world, but I'm sure it's hilarious.
Well, I mean, it sounds to me like a dig at Elon, that because he's going the conventional route of just buy all of Jensen's NVIDIA GPUs and keep pushing forward on scaling.
I don't think I don't think it's Elon. It's either dig at Meta or some of the people behind Meta or some of the venture cap, because Elon is doing the Pareto principle 80-20 thing just flawlessly, I feel. Well, I mean, I don't know what Dario was thinking, but I mean, I'd be surprised if it was Elon.
You very well could be right. Yeah. I guess it just strikes me as that because of, the insane. I mean, when I look at the players, my read of the lay of the land right now is that Elon is the one who's pushing all of the hyperscalers to keep doubling down all in on building the next biggest GPU cluster, that he's building bigger GPU clusters faster than anyone else. And so he is Jensen's favorite customer because he is the person that everyone else now has to chase. But
yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, because he's driving up the cost on everybody. He's like, yeah, why not? That just makes our margins better.
And maybe if we can share my screen for a second, I can kind of like give people a little bit of an overview as to just the scale of what we're talking about here. So this is from Visual Capitalist. They have some great visualizations and stuff like that. So definitely love their stuff. So this is the world's most powerful compute clusters. And just for people that want to understand the numbers, these are H100 equivalents, right, across the world. So if we kind of go here, so H100s, so everything is equivalent to sort of the NVIDIA's GPUs and stuff like that. And so just for everybody to understand, so I speak to myself, I think, Dylan, you're probably in this boat as well. Like, we're not like the hardware experts, the chips. We'd love to talk to somebody that knows this stuff really in depth. So that's kind of my next big thing. Like, I do want to wrap my head around this a lot better. So just take this with a grain of salt, but we're still learning. But I'd love to be able to understand if we talk about TPUs out of Google, they're not on here. So how do TPUs compare to GPUs of NVIDIA? Because Google has a lot of GPUs, but they also have their own TPUs. How does that scale-wise compared to everybody else? I have no idea. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. But notice the red models, they're anonymous Chinese systems, right? So notice there's a lot of them, right? They're popping up here and there. Meta Gen, 2024B, 2024A, right? These two, now they have this much. We have Microsoft and therefore OpenAI, right? We have X.AI Colossus phase 1, and then this is AI Colossus phase 2. So this is what we're talking about with Elon going all in on compute. As you can see here, the single biggest compute cluster in the world, right? Then we have,
which I think we should note here that is, these are the largest single coherent clusters, because like Meta has way more overall GPUs, but they don't have because they're a real company that has to serve real customers. They have lots and lots of data centers, lots and lots of GPUs. Most of them are smaller. They're not going to be these mega clusters. And so, that is one of the aspects in all of this that is going to be a really interesting dimension, is that if we can break the stranglehold on having to do training as this coherent process with one giant co-located cluster, and training can be done in a more distributed way, then that completely changes the competitive landscape of who is ahead and who's not, which is one of the reasons I really loved the conversation that you guys had with Karen from Noose Research, because what they're working on with the distro optimizer is, a huge key factor in how this is going to play out.
Yeah, and I'll throw in another thought too, is that when the chip export controls first hit in the US and it was harder for NVIDIA to get the H100s to China, a lot of the innovation, and I would see this come through in the research papers, was about how do you compute on slower GPUs, but connect them better. And in some sense, I do feel like China has a decent lead on the US in terms of taking multiple servers, multiple places, locations, getting that data to communicate over like fiber optic cables over long distances and unify together. Like we just don't have that same kind of history of two big companies like Elon's, companies and Microsoft's companies both working together to share data over distances and compute slower, but at higher scale. So that's another thing to just consider.
Yeah, they say creativity is the mother of invention. Is that right?
Yep.
So basically, so US kind of put the chokehold on the availability of compute in China. And instead of, not being able to do anything, they came up with incredible ways of, like Dylan said, either figuring out how to do it across different computes or different clusters, or complete new novel ways that are far, far more efficient. I think GRPO is one example. I think this is what the DeepSeek, everybody remembers the DeepSeek moment, whatever. I think GRPO was the thing that they came up with. And so this is Jay. He's blowing up online because he posted like a little explanation video of what GRPO is. So basically for people that maybe don't understand, so reinforcement learning is the idea. It's like when you're training a dog and he does something right, you give him an attaboy, give him a little treat, and you can also have negative reinforcement, right? Like punishment. You don't have to. You can do it with positive or positive and negative. So that's RL. When they talk about RL, that's in a nutshell what that is. We're training these models through saying good job or bad job to go towards something. And oftentimes how we train them is we have like this judge, almost like it's a separate model. It's almost like training it, like good job, bad job, bad job. GRPO, and again, my understanding of it, and people can dive deeper here, but GRPO is like you're thinking through multiple timelines to see which one is the most beneficial, right? So if you're trying to play a game of chess, you like think through the next 20 moves and you're like, which one is the most likely to get me to win? And those higher reward trajectories get sort of reinforced. So when the model comes up with a trajectory that's more likely to win, we go, attaboy, do that. And this tends to, again, if I understand correctly, much more compute efficient. That's why we saw DeepSeek just blowing up. I remember like NVIDIA lost like what, $1 trillion in one day or right? No, I forget the numbers, but it was huge. I think
it was big.
It was big. Global markets, I think, lost $1 trillion, right? In one day when DeepSeek came out. I don't remember, but it was huge. It was big numbers. Yeah, so just to finish up, so this is kind of like, it gives you an idea of who the main players are. Google's not on here, which would be interesting to see. Notice A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz is here as well, AWS. Anyways, so just to touch up on what we were talking about, and I realize I forgot the original question. So, but yeah, this was the answer, but I forgot what
Do you feel like Palantir? Sometimes I've got this weird feeling like Palantir has access to a lot more than is publicly available to. Just there's so many government contracts. I always kind of wonder what they have access to. I wonder why we never see them on any of these.
Well, so I'm an investor in Palantir, and I follow them relatively closely. You know, they're not my main position, so I don't spend as much time looking at them. But my understanding of how they work is they're probably arranging compute with these clouds as a middleman between their customers. Like, I don't think that, as far as I know, they have large, clusters that they own, but they're definitely coordinating the use of a lot of computing power, at the very least. So that's, that's a great question, a great call out, Dylan, because it could be much deeper than that. And of course, they're pretty cloak and dagger. So if it is more than that, it's hard to confirm.
Yeah, it just seems like the Pentagon has like pretty high, budgets, especially under the newest administration for military spending. And then it always seems like some of the technology that they invest in, I just don't know about. So I wonder, like, is there servers that are equivalent to some of these that the U.S. government has? And if so, is Palantir able to train on those? Unsure. But it does push forward the, technology as a whole. So it's interesting.
And you see a much bigger move right now for the state to own, for the U.S. to own more of stuff, data centers. They recently made a deal with Intel.
Yeah.
That was, Then the AI action plan, I mean, they basically spelled it out. Like, it's gonna. So, what's his name?
Are you in favor of that? Like, I'm just kind of curious your thoughts, because I don't know if I've heard, like, when I heard the U.S. government is maybe going to own 10% of Intel, I guess that's good, because that company is struggling and it needs somebody to invest heavily in it. But so it was also interesting to think about the government owning a chip company.
From the very beginning of my channel, that was one of the things where I thought I was crazy because nobody else was talking about it, because everybody was like, yeah, this hippy dippy lab in San Francisco is going to build super intelligence. I'm like, what? No, like, you think US and China is going to sit by, just hang out while someone somewhere builds super intelligence and all the other states and stuff like that. So when Aschenbrenner came up with situational awareness, I was like, because he was saying it's going to become a Manhattan Project. And I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about, because to me, it was kind of obvious just how nations operate, superpowers operate. They're going to take it under control. So I sort of knew it was going to happen. Like, that was not a question of if. I knew that there's going to be more and more overlap, 100%. Do I agree with it? That's like a whole, we got to go down a whole discussion.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's a lot. It's hard to.
Yeah, but the facts are, where the compute is being created is owned by only a couple places, right? Like, in China, you have Huawei building compute. And then you have Taiwan, which is more aligned with the US right now, but obviously that's very contentious in the long run, how that's going to play out. And then if you really think about NVIDIA just being something that the US government, in theory could, walk in there and say, hey, the next batch of H100s is going to this location in, New Mexico, and then that's just how it is. And then after that, you can sell the rest to Elon.
I mean,
maybe they have to do something like that,
I mean, notice this is the U.S. Department of Energy right here, right? So it's bigger than a lot of the anonymous Chinese clusters. It's 44K, right? So almost as big as Tesla, slightly less than Oracle. So it's not small, and that's the one that we can see, right? Yeah.
We also know that Oracle is, NSA defense and intelligence aligned. So between Oracle and the Department of Energy, that's a lot of compute that I'm sure they have at their disposal as well. And yeah, they have multiple clusters. And especially I think as AMD starts to pick up, and it becomes a lot easier to train on them, as CUDA is somewhat obviated on or its advantage over AMD software is somewhat obviated by people like George Hotz and all of the developer effort that's going into AMD stack right now as well.
Hans, on that kind of initial triangle you were talking to us about, sort of like compute and data and talent, does it feel like the government doesn't have the ability to get the same kind of talent? Maybe government budgets kind of like limit the way you can just pay people like the way Meta can, but then they do have maybe compute, because we're looking at a chart here that seems like they have access to it, and then they do have data because they're literally the government. Yeah. But is that organized enough to build anything from? I don't know.
It's a great point, and I think that their ability to lock certain types of efforts away behind a closed door would make it hard to know what their real ability is to
purchase talent.
Yeah, purchase talent and or just surveil talent and use what the smart people who are outside the government are doing and bring that into the government. So yeah, those are great questions.
And I mean, I feel like if you look at from the Cold War era to now, how US and Russia developed, were very different. Because I mean, a lot of this stuff kind of is reminiscent of the Cold War era a little bit, right? What's happening now, just with China and, kind of like the tech race and stuff like that. But like in the sort of communist countries, it's just the state was just like, we own you, you work for us. And there's, when the wall fell, a lot of people escaped, a lot of people got out because they just wanted to have that freedom. US approaches a little bit differently, but I think it's kind of naive to think about that the some government the government is not involved with all of these interests, with all these companies, right? In the past, it was the oil companies, right? Now this is the new oil, so to speak, right? They're in there, you know what I mean? So we just don't know how, but it's not like all of these places are operating independently, right? So just throwing that out there.
And I'm also leaning towards the idea that the bigger these numbers are, the better their data is also, just because it seems like I've completely changed. Like, this was not me a few years ago, if you watch my channel, but it did feel like synthetic data wasn't going to work. I used to have this kind of idea that, there's real internet and the first models were trained on it, and then we're going to kind of throw out something synthetic and we're going to train on it and the models will get worse. But then the more I think about it, in almost every individual case, like if you want to play the game of chess, why not have synthetic data? It can play itself until it's superhuman. And then I start thinking about just all these different industries, from self-driving cars. Why, like, I thought Tesla had this huge lead because they had cameras everywhere. And not that isn't important data, but a little bit of that and then a whole bunch of like driving simulations seems like it might get you to superhuman like driving ability. And the list goes on, whether it's as weird as real estate or fashion. It just somehow it seems like synthetic data can, in a lot of cases and not all of them, in health, it seems like I've seen some examples. It seems like synthetic data might get us over that hump too, and be better than real data in most cases, as long as there's a little bit of real data to just kind of ground it once in a while and sort of keep it on track.
And do we want to talk a little bit about because this is kind of intersecting with Grok 4 and what Elon's doing.
Yeah, we can definitely move on to, so I guess Elon he's aware of all of these individual constraints that we've talked about: compute, talent, data, energy. And he's pushing ahead. It seems to me like my read, and I think from what we've spoken about, that you would agree, Wes, that Elon read the bitter lesson. He believes in scaling laws, and he believes that the combination of compute and data specifically, expanding the search allows you to expand the search space to converge to a superhuman solution to general intelligence faster than anything else, which is why we see him. We've kind of woven this thread, so far, that all of this started back when Elon was actually one of the original people who provided funding to DeepMind and to Demis Hassabis. And so he's been watching this whole field incubate, since the early 2010s. And then we saw his involvement in OpenAI. Of course, OpenAI was intended to be this hedge so that Google didn't end up being, the sole owner of this massive artificial intelligence future. So he propped up Sam to be a competitor to them. And then Sam decided that he didn't really want to align with Elon. And so Sam accelerated OpenAI. In so doing, he also accelerated Google DeepMind, woke up the sleeping dragon that was inside of Google, pulled ahead early, and now seems to be potentially falling behind, and forced Elon's hand to then say, okay, fine. I have to be involved in the race. I have to be involved in the race directly. I cannot be involved in the race through proxy. And so I have to rapidly catch up as quickly as humanly possible. And so I'm going to make, this insane bold bet that no one else is making on, I don't believe that 30,000 H100 GPUs is the biggest coherent cluster that we can make. I'm going to go down to first principles. I'm going to figure out, can we make it bigger? Oh yes, the answer is we can, because physics says so. And so let's move heaven and earth to get all of the GPUs, all of the power, all of the networking, all of the data into Memphis, Tennessee in a ridiculously short period of time, and then just turn the crank, finish Colossus 1. The original goal was 100,000 H100s, which was 3 times the largest equivalent cluster or mega cluster at the time. Since then, it's grown to well over 200,000 H100 equivalents. They've got a bunch of H200s, and then they even have some GB200s in that cluster. And now they're beginning to build out Colossus 2, which is going to be whatever, I think, roughly 1 million H100 equivalents, or maybe it's going to just be 1 million GPUs. I'm really not sure what, Elon kind of talks. Sometimes he's talking about GPUs in terms of H100 equivalents, and sometimes he's just talking about actual, legitimate numbers of GPUs. So I'm somewhat confused there, but so that's what we've seen him do over the last few years, and it puts him in a very unique position in this overall race. And so, that's the setup, and I'll let y'all take it from there and say, okay, so if this is where we are, what does that mean?
A lot of great points there about Elon, and I'm sometimes also confused about, because he said they're going to have, I'm trying to look up the quote, but 1 million, he said some very large number of compute equivalents to NVIDIA that they're going to have over the next 5 years. I'm sitting there doing the math, so I'm like, so that number, he's saying it's 250 times more than what this phase 2 Colossus 2 is. I'm like, in the next 5 years, you're going to 250x that? That seems so insane, doesn't it? But at this point, I just throw my hands up.
But do you not believe it? But also, because sometimes I feel like you have to believe Elon when he says that, because there's unlimited money and he's got phone numbers for everybody that matters.
Again, he's like, I would never bet against them, because so many people just get crushed betting against them. I would never bet against them. I'm just staggered by the scale, but it's hard to believe, but I would never say that I would bet against it. I guess that's my point. That's because that's a huge number. So basically, I guess just really fast, if I can maybe like talk about a little bit about how I see this race heading up. And take everything with a grain of salt because this is just based on my observations. But we've also talked to a lot of people that are in the space, so it seems like this is definitely, similar to what everybody else is thinking. The people that are doing this work and following this work. So basically, initially with Google, you had things like AlphaGo, AlphaZero, where you would use reinforcement learning techniques to teach them to play games, right? And one thing that they found is that when, with AlphaGo, Lee Sedol was the world champion at Go. So that was the big Google DeepMind thing in, I forget the year, 2013 maybe. So the championship where AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol, the world champion, right? And of course, it was very, Lee Sedol was crying. He wasn't crying, but he was visually upset. You could see it. And one of the big things that came out of that one, and also from AlphaZero, which was the very next sort of version of that thing, is that when we teach these AI models on human data, so we gave them human games, they get good. They get as good as humans. They parrot how humans play, and they get as good as humans. When we don't tell them anything and we just let them play themselves, right? They start out horrible. They're like making random moves. They don't know how to play. But given enough time, given enough compute, given enough iterations and games played, like hundreds of millions, billions of games, they get superhuman. And not only do they get superhuman, but with like AlphaGo, the infamous move 37, for people that are not aware, it was a very unique move that humans don't tend to make. So they merge with these strategies that to us are alien, that we don't understand. We look at it and we go, that's not smart what this AI model did. And then when the game is over and it just like steamrolled you, we're like, oh, I see what you did, right? We get beaten and then we're like, oh, I see why that move is brilliant. That's move 37. You're going to hear that more and more because a lot of people are referring to that as, it just means machine creativity, things that we don't kind of quite think of. But the point is like this concept of self-play and synthetic data. So instead of giving them human games, they will play themselves, creating synthetic data. So self-play. And that got us quite far. But then later we had LLMs. LLMs are completely different. It's like a different branch of AI that's a little bit more general, a little bit more human almost, right? And now the new intersection is where we're taking what we learned from AlphaZero and all those things, and we're intersecting it with LLMs. So we're using that, scaling up that reinforcement learning for LLMs, and we're seeing some pretty incredible results with that. So maybe if I can share my screen, I can show people some of the things that maybe we've been seeing. So I guess let's start here. Okay, so really fast. So this was presented before Grok 4 was released. This was at the Sequoia Capital, which is a very large capital, what are they called? Capital, venture capitalists, very large investment fund into tech. They had this presentation. So GPT-4o was pre-training compute. And I guess really fast, just Andre Kirkpatrick, how he explained what pre-training compute is versus reinforcement learning. So if you're reading like a math textbook, when you're reading the chapter, that's like pre-training. You're just reading and sort of memorizing stuff or understanding certain concepts. It's just reading and learning, right? Then at the end of the chapter, you have often problems broken down and they show you how to solve it step by step. That's a little bit more like RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. That is more like parroting, right? So you look at how the instructor solves a problem and you try to do it as well, right? So RLHF is a little bit more like memorization, parroting, like mimicking what is shown to you. And then at the end of the chapter, you usually have just the math problems with no hints, no solutions, but you might get the answer at the back of the book. So you're able to do the problem on your own and then check to make sure if you get it right or wrong. Okay. So, and that's RL. That's kind of like that scaled up RL, reinforcement learning, right? So what they're saying, and then keep in mind, this was before Grok 4. This was a while ago. I don't remember the date on this, but May 2025, it says, okay, so the original models, GPT-4, GPT-4o, it was just pre-training compute. It would just read the textbook. And later, the reinforcement learning of human feedback, where we kind of like, this is how you answer questions. This is how you talk, blah, 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 like that, right? Then O1, that was the big breakthrough. O1, if you remember that Q-star leak, that was a Stanford paper from 2022, I think. So that paper got published that kind of showed people that, hey, these models can reason and they can improve their reasoning. So O1 was kind of like that. Then O3, and notice the RL compute, right? It's just sitting there engaged in solving problems. That's growing. So OpenAI in May of this year, 2025, said that really, as we keep going, what's going to happen is that the original pre-training compute, like what we did here. Are you guys seeing my mouse? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So pre-training compute, GPT-4 was all that, right? In the future, that's going to be this, right? That's going to be the pre-trained compute, and RL compute is going to take over. So that's going to be the next big scaling
and it's somewhat deceptive that the circles there are all the same size, because really what's happening is the GPT-4o circle is going to be tiny in compared to the size of the compute that's necessary to do that little bitty pre-training compute and inside of a giant RL compute thing, at some point in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what they meant, is that this, that this should have been bigger. But I think this illustrates the point that it's going to sort of shift. So this is before Grok 4. So then Grok 4 comes out, and guess what? So notice this is Grok 2. So the white is the pre-training compute. Grok 3, 10x the pre-training compute. And Grok 2 to Grok 3, that was a big leap. And this is what they mean by scaling laws, right? We 10x the amount of hardware we throw at it, it gets better. But there's only so much 10xing you can do before you run out of GPUs and money and whatever. And then they created Grok 3 with reasoning. So Grok 3 with reasoning was the same amount of compute, with this yellow being the RL compute that they've thrown on it. So they're just sitting there doing math problems and coding problems and checking its answers like, oh, I did that wrong, let me try again, and learning from it, right? And then what is Grok 4? Is Grok 4 just a bigger base model? No. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing as Grok 3 in terms of like the base model, but they threw 10x the RL compute at it. So
while we're right here, can I ask you the question, what do you think that 10x compute is composed of? Is that more time or more GPUs or both?
Well, compute is GPUs times GPUs times time. So basically, if you double the GPUs, that's double the compute, but you can also increase the training time. So it's kind of like a function of that. It's both of those things.
But it just seems like they were able to 10x that amount of compute in such a short period of time. Like there's not that much time in between when Grok 3 and Grok 4 released.
Yeah, so here's the problem, and this is how it was explained to me. I don't know if this is true or not. The issue is that Tesla and a lot of the Elon Musk companies, they used to publish a lot more of their research.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, but how it was explained to us, to me and Dylan, is that he started seeing a lot of Chinese knockoffs of a lot of stuff based on the research that he was releasing. And so one day, I guess he was like, that's enough of that. And so now, unfortunately, Tesla and X.AI and everybody else, just the amount of stuff that they publish is less than a lot of the other labs, unfortunately, because I would love to read papers published by X.AI.
Right. Well, I know, and even with Zuckerberg now, like moving to like more private models, and everybody just being so scared because it is. I guess they've all learned that when you push this stuff out there, it's so easily replicated that it can just lose your moat.
Yeah, I know that Tesla was attending CVPR pretty regularly and putting out all this information that we used to cover, and then it's like over the last couple of years that just dried up. Like we're not going to say anything about what we're doing with Optimus. We're not going to say anything about how we're building FSD anymore. We're not going to, like, the only thing that you guys get to know is, hey, we've got a lot more compute now.
Yeah. What's the name of the woman who wrote the book on OpenAI from the MIT Tech Review? Anyways, I forgot her name, but she did the kind of the inside story of the whole OpenAI. And it was interesting because she had so many interviews with people throughout the 10 years that they've kind of got to this point. And the way that they were completely open at the beginning, and then everything from just secrets getting out to like governments wanting to be like them to have like more security, to bureaucracy and corporate things starting to like be IP risk, just over and over again, you could see the door tighten and tighten and tighten. And then eventually she even stopped getting interviews. And it was just sort of fascinating that just that gradual decline in openness seems to be kind of inevitable with so much on the line.
Yeah, it seems like it's mirroring that trajectory that you were mentioning earlier, Wes, where this is impinging more and more on national security. And as national security implications grow, which was kind of inevitable if this was what people really wanted to build in the first place, then you get into a world where whether you wanted to be open or not, you don't get to anymore.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I wonder if Google would have published like their papers on attention is all you need and given OpenAI that opportunity if they would have really thought through it all.
That's a good question.
But then again, that paper could still be sitting at Google in some archive and nobody at Google would have executed on it. You know what I mean? And it was a gem that was overlooked internally and they went a whole different direction and we'd be 5 years behind right now, or a couple of years behind or whatever.
And I believe that's exactly the same thing you saw before the Manhattan Project. Is a lot of the research into nuclear physics and anything related to the A-bomb slowly disappeared from universities. Like it just, you see if it's a line of publications in that area, it's like ooh, leading up to the Manhattan Project, the development of the bomb. So yeah, it sucks. I mean, I get it, but yeah, it's sad to see.
I guess I'll throw a couple thoughts out there. You know, when I'm trying to think through like who these players are and how Tesla and Elon are going to do, I try this thought experiment where I just imagine a huge industry that's disrupted by AI in some way. And like what, if you look at the current players out there, like who would they want to partner with? So just for example, if you think about finance, right? You think about a bunch of people at hedge funds and Wall Street, and they see AI just taking off. Are they going to go to Bloomberg and sign some contract to get access to their model? Are they going to go to Microsoft's cloud and grab an OpenAI model and fine tune it? And then when the money comes in and they're right and they're making like ungodly amounts of money because they've got the stock market edge that nobody's ever seen before, which company would kind of grow? You know, and it seems to me, since something like finance is so strictly software based, they would go probably to the Microsoft cloud, and that would probably be the company that would benefit. You know, maybe they would go to Google or something, but there's also the entire hardware world where I think to myself, okay, there's going to be robots that construct houses, and there's going to be bulldozers that are automated, and there's going to be robots that are like manufactured in some kind of a warehouse. And then I think, okay, that could be Elon's money, maybe, or maybe not. Like, I'm not sure if Elon Musk is going to end up building these like gigafactories that produce objects, but they're all going to be in a single ecosystem, like the way Apple is right now. Like, it seems to me like Elon's ecosystem might be the next Apple, where things are very seamless, but it's not for everyone. Or maybe he'll say, hey, I've got this technology that can build an Optimus robot or a car. If you want to take it, you know, GE and build airplane engines, and if people in China want it to build machines that build bridges, like maybe that could be open sourced, or maybe he'll just be too tightly integrated into the whole Grok system and still be extremely successful and build an ecosystem like Apple that everyone likes. But then there'll be another one out there that's like the hardware manufacturer. And I'm not quite sure I have like my head around who builds great hardware. I mean, maybe that's Apple's second renaissance. Like maybe Tim Cook gets kicked out and it ends up partnering with somebody like maybe even like Meta or something, where they bring the social aspect and they bring the hardware aspect, and the AI like fits on top of, you know, Apple's like ability to manufacture across the world. And then they become kind of the more open, kind of more hodgepodgey, more mistakes, but more everybody can like jump on and build on top of it kind of a thing. So I don't know. We'll have to see kind of where this all builds up to.
Yeah. And he talked about macro hard, his answer to Microsoft, which
Yeah.
I think he's saying is basically going to be, instead of an app store, it's going to be something that just develops whatever apps and websites, whatever you need on your phone live, similar to these diffusion models. It's just like whatever you need, like it just generates it.
Yeah, but even with Google, like with Waymo, it's like, okay, even if they figure out the software side, it feels to me like Google would be the kind of company that would then put an API together and put a team in place and then go make a deal with all the like Mercedes-Benz and BMW, and they would like fit it in, and it would be more sloppy and there'd be a little more mistakes just because of the different amounts of cars that it has to handle. And then feels like Elon would just build a few car models and then just do them really well. And it would be sort of that Microsoft versus Apple thing again.
Yeah, I agree. Because Google is much likely to just build the software and tell somebody else you build the hardware and you use it. Elon's like, nope, I'm going to build everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, almost like just a replay of Android.
But yeah, I think like building Starship actually was like kind of set a really interesting groundwork. I mean, if you think about Elon's history, it was very hardware based with a software focus, which kind of makes it a little bit more like Apple in its inception. And then later he was able to just purchase the software layers, like owning Twitter and things to fit on top of it. So yeah, maybe that's part of why he is building so fast in the hardware department. He just seems to be better than a lot of these guys at that sort of thing.
Yeah, surprising. Hans, I'm sorry. What did you say about Android?
Well, so I was just thinking about Google, and that's what they did with Android is they didn't really want to get into manufacturing enough phones to put a big dent in the overall cell phone market. So yes, they did their own manufacturing effort so that they could understand how to build great software for it and have something in the game. But it's really more as a seed to then place that defensive open source, like burn the bridges, or not burn the bridges, but create a fire break around Apple and their ability to just monetize cell phones endlessly. That Google could do something similar to that with hardware. And we know that, like, so for instance, they've partnered with Apptronic on humanoid robots, and they are focusing heavily on the software side of things, that they're not necessarily building robots in-house. And then so you've got Jensen, and he's trying to give people the platform to build robotics on top of. That's like this general open source platform. And then Google I think trying to go heavy into really developing the software, which they could then also open source. It's like those are two different efforts to...
Yeah, it seems like Mark Zuckerberg did, like, it doesn't feel like it right now, but he probably did it the right move by really building hardware with like the Oculus, like purchasing it and then investing in it so heavy with Oculus. And I know it doesn't seem like it yet, but it also could just be in the future, you need all sorts of like glasses. And then they're like, oh, we also have the now ability to create a smart screen for the front of a car, or maybe like for a house, or for all these other things. And the one thing it feels like the US just is really missing is like a drone company. Like we just have nothing like DJI. And that to me feels like it's such a big player and such an important thing to own for the future. And I don't know why GoPro or Meta or nobody can just get drones right, but that's going to be a huge disadvantage for the US if we can't figure that out.
That's really been the FAA's fault. And I think because it's becoming such a glaring national security problem that we have basically put the kibosh on drone development here in the United States, I think that's being opened up. And so like the two people that I watch in that space are Zipline and Anduril. And like between the two of them, I think, and then, people like Elon, if it ever comes to it, to be able to spin up a whole bunch of manufacturing in the space, like that's definitely one area where we're behind. We have got to figure out a way to catch up. And like, those are the two efforts that look the most promising.
Yeah. Because if China's the first to build robots that then build warehouses that then build anything, drones, robots, or more, and that circular system is in place, and then we try to catch up, it's so much slower. It's so much easier to steal software, and it's so much harder to steal an entire manufacturing logistics line. You can't just start mining ore and then just get it where you need it to be. And they'll have so many leverage points on us.
I'm curious what you guys think about because you brought up Anduril. So Anduril, I believe Palmer Luckey, he's like the founder of that. So he said this kind of interesting thing. So he's saying, and they build basically autonomous weapons, autonomous AI weapons, drone counter defenses, stuff like that. And so a lot of people are, of course, concerned about autonomous AI using weapons. And his sort of response to that was this idea that we've had autonomous weapons for centuries. Like a landmine is autonomous, right? But he's saying what we didn't have, what we didn't have is smart autonomous weapons. So a landmine, if a child steps on it, it blows up. He's saying with the smart autonomous weapons, we have a chance to. It could be better.
Yeah.
And
it's an interesting distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, there's like a lot of cognitive dissonance there. I'm like, I guess that kind of makes sense, but also, no, it's a trap.
Well, what's crazy is because you can't, like, one thing that's just never crossed my mind till right now is that, yeah, if Elon builds these humanoids and there's an Optimus robot in everyone's household, the same way we have a lot of Teslas all over the US, then I guess in a military setting, if we're like, hey, if the national government's like, hey, we're at war, we're going to have to for the war effort, we're going to have to repurpose everybody's humanoids. I think they'll just walk out of your house, right? And be like, we got to go defend the border like right now. And they'll just get repurposed because unlike a landmine, they can be controlled by a single entity at the top. And I guess if like Grok 25, that's ASI is like, hey, like my prerogatives to protect the US, I'm going to need to repurpose all the cars and robots. Like, we'll just be like, all right, I guess that's how it is.
Yeah. And I mean, Elon talked to the Department of Defense or one of those organizations where he was sitting down for general. I forget what the organization was, but it was like US's military, right? Talking to all the generals and whatever. And they asked, like, what's the future of warfare? Like, he didn't mince words. He was like, it's just who can produce the most drones, right? Because if it's going to be drone warfare, and he's
right,
like,
it's not going to be the humanoids; it'll be the drones.
Yeah, and maybe there will be a time where humanoids are like World War II, how you had like cavalry, and the tanks, kind of like. But there might be a point where they're at the peak, but like just swarms and swarms of drones controlled by some sort of a agent.
Yeah. I mean, because you're right. If China has millions, tens of millions more drones than us, and they also have the software to help them work in swarms, to think intelligently, make decisions faster than they go to any country. You know what I mean? Like, they do whatever they want, or we do whatever, or whoever has them does whatever they want.
Yep. The only other, big element of, I think, military technology that is going to be another powerful deciding factor is going to be, control over the domain of space, which right now the U.S. will clearly dominate with, as long as they don't mess up SpaceX for some strange reason. But yeah, like our ability to loft payload into orbit at a scale that is, significantly larger than anyone else gives you the ultimate high ground. And from the ultimate high ground, you have a lot of tactical options at your disposal.
Yeah, I saw, maybe the pudding did it, but I recently saw a graph of just like how many satellites are in orbit and by year. And it shows, 1950, 1960, 1970, and the dots are just like, do like very slowly, and then it was just like 2022, 2023, 2024, just thousands every single year of new satellites go up. It's like totally incredible how populated space is getting recently.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to reusable Starship yet, so hopefully Flight 10 launches today and will be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I always want to know how Elon's brain works because a lot of the stuff that we talk about, he sees it before a lot of other people, and he doesn't change his mind. Have you guys heard the comedian Neil Brennan? He has the 3 mics. He worked with Dave Chappelle back in the days on his show or whatever. He's got a huge podcast on YouTube. He interviews other comedians. Anyways, he's like, the people in his life, like his accountant, his lawyer, like the people that he wants giving him advice, and like the smart people. He's like, they always just need like a touch of Asperger's, just a touch. That's his level.
I know. And I'm like, You have to be so disconnected from the moment to think, you know what I mean? It's a weird, like all the best ideas come in the shower because nobody's bothering you. You have to be kind of in your own world to think this way. And
then other people
is. Yeah.
Yeah. And other people like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. And you're like, oh, I guess you're right. And we tend to let go of our ideas so easily. And what's his name? Peter Thiel is saying how like a disproportionate amount of unicorn founders, like people that reach $1 billion plus, they're Asperger's or autistic in some way, because they don't care. They're like, I have this idea. 1 million people told me it's a stupid idea. I'm still building it.
Yeah.
I was still right. They were all still wrong.
Yeah. And then they get $1 billion and they just like, whatever, like how Elon just dances on stage. It's like, yeah, you got it.
And everybody's, when you talk about Zuckerberg spending maybe $1 billion for a single employee, and you're like, well, if ASI is really what we imagine it is, and you think in exponentials, that should be a drop in the bucket if that gives you the edge that you need to make $50 billion or trillions, or we move past a money economy, like, and you have control over that. Like, it's just so much. Also, I hate to say it, but I have to just run, but I'll let you guys keep chatting. But I wanted to say, Hans, like, thank you for giving me the chance to like come chat with you today.
Thank you for participating. As I really I've been a fan of what both of you have been doing together. And so I really enjoyed getting to toss these ideas around you or with you. And definitely look forward to having more conversations in the future.
Yep.
So have a great afternoon and thank you.
Sure. All right, Dylan. See you later. All right. So where should we go from here? Because we definitely have so much to cover.
So we were on your slide about the Grok 4 and how much RL compute was in that. Did you want to continue down that thread or?
Yeah, let's do it. So if we can maybe get my screen up there. So just continuing where we left off, because just a few more points that I just wanted to make, because I think this is so interesting. And I do think that this is the next big sort of scaling thing that we're going to see with these AI models. It's the next wave. So initially, the scaling laws were referring to the idea of pre-training compute, and we're just scaling that up. Actually, the next big thing was what they called test time compute. So it's the idea of allowing these models to think before they answer. That was what Q-star was, basically, that idea of it having a chain of thought, reasoning before it outputted the actual answer. And we'll get back to that in just a second, too, because that had an effect, and it also continued the scaling process, at least on sort of an S curve where it ramps up, but then it kind of flatlines a little bit because, again, everything is exponential. So if the more you throw at it, you can continue getting progress, but at exponentially higher and higher cost. So, and the next thing is this idea of the RL compute, scaling that up. And I think that Elon Musk was the first one to really hammer it pretty hard. Again, like I said, we don't know exactly what the number. Yeah, go ahead.
If we're making that, I think assessment, educated guess, which I think is reasonable. Why do you think that is? Is it just because he was the first one to really have the compute resources to achieve that? I mean, obviously OpenAI has known that this is the direction that they're going. Why weren't they not able to beat Elon to this achievement?
To me, it always seems
I guess one related question to that is, and has Google also already done that and we just don't know?
That's a good question. Let me get back to Google, because that's an interesting question about what Google is doing in this arena. Because they were, but the other thing is Google has all their alpha models, and those are doing incredible work. Isomorphic Labs, the spinoff from AlphaFold, right, and a lot of the technology behind that, I'm paying careful attention to that, because if we develop some anti-aging technology, Dylan was able to talk to Aubrey de Grey. I don't know if you're familiar with that. He's that person that talks about living forever through improved health outcomes, through technology improving health. And I think it was his idea, the idea of the escape velocity. So the idea that at some point our technology is going to be improving our life expectancy, let's say more than a year for every year that we're alive. All right. So you live 1 year, but your life expectancy goes up 2 years. So it's kind of this idea that maybe somebody alive today might live to see 400 years, 200 years. And so Aubrey de Grey is actually betting on by 2030, potentially beginning to see that escape velocity, which to me seems, wild. I don't know if I would bet on that, but man, that would be incredible. Imagine.
Well, what we've done with AlphaFold is I think we've only just barely begun to scratch the tip of the iceberg of what AlphaFold is going to unlock for humanity, both positively and negatively, mostly positively, I think. So yeah, I personally, I don't find it that surprising, especially when you then follow it with what you're talking about, that all of these different alpha projects are seeing really good progress on the back of just massive amounts of reinforcement learning on these domain specific models that then are, unlocking lots of new possibilities. Like if we can do this with proteins, what else can we do this with? And obviously biology is a huge area. I was also just blown away by the project that they did with weather. I'm blanking out on the name, but they were able to actually outperform our best deterministic, FEA and CFD weather models with just a graph neural network. GraphCast, I think, was the name of it. And so our ability to use structures like graph neural networks in order to at least approximate, if not outperform, highly complicated deterministic software, that seems like it has no end in sight to applications. And especially, since the takeaway from GraphCast was that it cost a tiny fraction of the overall time and tiny fraction of the overall compute to achieve. It was like a 90%, I think, roughly result compared to the deterministic weather software. But it compounded a lot better in the future because the deterministic software had a ceiling on the overall number of inputs that it could compute. And so the further out in time that you went, it eventually runs into a wall where it can no longer provide you with, weather forecasts beyond a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And you could iterate on the predictions of the GraphCast system. And even though you might be a little the deterministic model would be a little bit more accurate over the next day or 2 days or 3 days. But then once you went past that, then the GraphCast forecast was actually better and continued to get better over time because it had, it has better scaling capability. And so, I think that has a lot of application for many, many domains. If you can theoretically simulate something as complicated as the weather, think about what that means for traditional FEA and CFD for all types of different real world hard engineering problems that we have to solve.
Yeah. And just to think about the fact that, because yes, there's so many different models that they produce, right? AlphaFold, whatever the name of the weather one, what did you say was the weather model?
GraphCast. This is several years ago.
Interesting. I've heard references to it. I haven't looked at it. But here's another thing. And they also had their Alpha Qubit, I believe they called it, which is what helped them work on the quantum chip that was able to somehow correct those quantum fluctuations or whatever, something about some self-correcting mechanism. So it's there's so many things that it can be applied to the system. It seems like from weather, and they're working on some sort of a nuclear energy as well. But I think that if you look at Alpha Evolve, which they've announced in the last 6 months or so, I think this year was, where basically they're using these large language models to solve various math problems and various optimization problems that beforehand humans were not able to solve. And they're applying it to, for example, improving the chip design in the TPUs and in the actual chips that they're running the AI on. They used it to improve the training, how they approach training for the Gemini models. So you're beginning to see an example of these AI models improving themselves, or the next generation of the AI models, which is scary to think about, because then that can get applied to everything else, right? So like, what if we keep that sort of loop of it improving itself, and then we ask it to develop a weather prediction program, right? So in other words, if it keeps getting smarter and we ask the smarter model to create what we attempted to, I mean, eventually, we talked to Nick Bostrom, and I asked him, like, I forget exactly what I asked him, but something along the lines of like, how do we preserve human innovation? And at some point he's like, yeah, at some point it's not going to be possible. Like at some point these models are going to get so good that, like, forget humans doing anything. We're just not going to be able to help or even understand some of the stuff, which is scary. But yeah, that's one of like Google's models. But just getting back to this RL, because I do think it's an important point that I think some people are missing, is the idea, like, what happens when we scale up RL compute in these, RL gyms or whatever. And this is the first example, I think, of it working at this scale. And it worked very phenomenally. So the ARC-AGI prize, give me a second. So here's during when they were, this is humanity's last exam. So again, they're showing scaling training, scaling test and compute. And then of course, like the next big thing is like the RL scaling. Let me find the graphic that I'm thinking of. Okay, so I think this is going to be kind of a good example of why this is important. So this is the ARC-AGI prize. One of the founders is Francois Chollet, who spent a lot of time thinking about intelligence, what intelligence is. And one of the things that he's saying, that there is a problem with a lot of the benchmarks, how we benchmark these AI models, because it's not showing true intelligence. It's showing memorization, but it can't really adapt in certain environments. And so one way of thinking about it is there's such an idea like crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. So crystallized intelligence is drawing on all your experiences from the past to be able to do something, solve a problem. Fluid intelligence is more like you've never encountered a problem before. How rapidly are you able to solve it? So not drawing on previous knowledge. And, with humans, as we get older, we have more experience, we tend to be better with crystallized knowledge, right? So we draw upon our experience to solve the problem, to think about solutions. And the fluid intelligence usually peaks in early adulthood, right? So usually younger people tend to have better fluid intelligence. They're not relying on their experience. They're just exploring and figuring stuff out. And so if you think about large language models have crystallized intelligence, right? If they have tons of data on the problem, they'll figure it out, right? If they've never encountered a problem before, they're going to fail. They're going to have a hard time. And so a lot of the ARC-AGI, in part, one of the things that they're testing is, you could say, fluid intelligence. So in other words, if we give it something that it doesn't have a lot of data on, where it has to just look and observe and learn, how well does it do at that? And and models have really struggled with that. But here comes Grok with thinking, and notice how outside of everything it is at the time. Like, this is the competition, right? Claude O3 Pro on high thinking mode, and then Grok is just like zoom. I also noticed that this axis is the cost per task, and it's logarithmic. So each step is bigger than the previous step, right? So you go from $1 to 10 to 100 to 1,000, right? So notice that it's also not like over here, right? It's in line with the rest of them, but it's just that much smarter. And so one of the co-founders, the president of ARC-AGI, Greg Comrade, I believe. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Maybe his last name is Comrade. So he was saying that Grok 4 is displaying non-zero levels of fluid intelligence. So in other words, it's able to figure stuff out on the fly, if you will. And so far, even GPT-5 or the other models didn't really approach this. So this is still state of the art on this leaderboard. At the same time, let me show you another benchmark that I think is interesting, is this vending bench, where these models, we try to see if they're able to run a vending machine business, right? So they got to figure out what products are popular, stock them, make sure they don't run out of product, stuff like that. And before Grok 4 released, the best model was Claude, I want to say 3.7 Sonnet, I think. Then Grok 4 and GPT-5 come out, and this is the new score. So this updated August 13th. So how it works is this model is given $500 and it runs the vending machine business. So see here, it got up to just under 5,000. So that means it 10x'd its money. So the leaderboard is currently Grok 4, GPT-5, Claude Opus 4, and in fourth place, in shameful fourth place is a human. It's humans that take on this challenge, right? So yikes. And then as you go down the list, the scores get worse. And also, if it's in red, that means they lost money. So we gave them 500, they ended up with 200, so they lost money. And also, this is the mean, so this is kind of the average result, but this is the minimum result. So it's important because these models sometimes go just off the rails, right? And they do horribly. So it's also important to take that into account. But so notice Grok just beats everyone out, not just on average, but also the spread here is low. For Claude 3.7 Sonnet, this one, even though it does pretty well, as you can see, like the minimum, it still loses money on its worst attempts.
Yeah, as an investor, would you prefer to put money into the one who actually it makes quite a bit of money, and at the very least it makes still quite a bit of money, or the one that it made a lot of money, but it might also lose a lot of money?
Exactly. As an investor, you're putting a lot of attention on this minimum, right? Because it's like, okay, what's the worst? Like at its worst, does it just lose all my money? Grok doesn't. At its worst, Grok still makes a lot. It's like 5x or whatever that is. I didn't do the math on it, but still performs very, very.
Yeah, almost 7, like 6 and some change.
Yeah. Absolutely phenomenal. You know what I mean? So, and then recently we talked to Adam Binksmith from AI Digest, AI Village. AI Village is the one where those agents, they get together and they try to do stuff to whatever task. Every season's a new task. So one day they have to raise, or one season they have to raise money for charity. Next season they have to run like a merch store, an e-commerce store. Let me type it in here really fast. Yes, here it is. So AI Village. So it's at theaidigest.org. They're a nonprofit. So actually Daniel Kokotayo, who was the OpenAI whistleblower, ex-OpenAI researcher, he had this idea. And then Adam Binksmith, who I believe he's over there in Oxford, UK. So he put this together. So this is not a product that I'm pitching. I'm just like really excited. It's a nonprofit. They're doing it for research. And yeah, so just, yeah, not pitching anything. I'm just like really interested in this project because it's a great benchmark. Because instead of them, the large language models doing some benchmark test or whatever, this is real world. Can you do stuff in the real world? And so you can see them going about their tasks live. In this new scenario, I think they've been asked to, let me see, why aren't they playing here? So they're live only a certain amount of time a day, but you can see the replay here. So for this season, they're asked to play games, to score as high as they can on as many games. So as you can see, Claude Opus 4.1 is playing Sudoku. GPT-5 is playing Minesweeper, right? And then they write down their scores in a shared Google Doc file. This to me is just like mind-blowing and amazing, and I love following it. But my point is that they just launched GPT-5 and Grok just a week or two ago. So right now, we're going to be seeing how well does Grok perform in the wild on various, tests as an agent, right? So how well is he going to be able to play games and do all the other stuff? And this is going to be kind of a big deal because when these things get good enough, they replace remote workers, right? So if you have like an intern or somebody that is some amount of work for you, this will replace it once it gets good. And it's not there yet, if you pay attention to what these guys are doing, if you look at some of the replays, they still do silly mistakes. They're still not quite there yet. But this new generation that just came out, GPT-5, Grok 4, we're going to be seeing the results over the next weeks and months. And it's going to be interesting to see. And just based on the other stuff that I showed you, I think that Grok might do very, very well. So the question becomes, is it because in part of that fluid intelligence, is it because of that scaled up RL compute? Is it that we're seeing just some new ability emerge? Because we've seen that with, back in the days with AlphaGo, AlphaZero. So are we unlocking the same potential with these large language models? And so that's why I'm paying attention to Elon Musk, because he, I think, has just either an intuitive sense or whatever you want to call it about where things are going, and he just goes all in. And that intuition or whatever, that just keeps paying off. And I think now he's going in on RL compute, and he's got the biggest cluster in the world. So what happens next?
Yeah. And I mean, one of the debates that you have followed closely is Gary Marcus. And, he's always old man shakes fist at sky. LLMs will never be able to accomplish blah, 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 blah. And it feels to me like this combination of RL on top of, just like you were saying, that this is, if you take the architecture of LLMs and you just call this like the general purpose AI foundation. And so I would call that the generative AI technology. That if you combine RL at scale with generative AI technology as the foundation, that we are approaching perhaps the AlphaGo moment for generative AI, which is the AlphaGo moment for artificial general intelligence. If that's true, what will Gary Marcus say? And does, is RL the thing that breaks Gary Marcus's model about, what LLMs can and cannot do, what their limitations are?
Yeah. So Gary Marcus, we briefly DM'd on Twitter. So I don't know him too well, but we've had some interactions. I think first and foremost, he is a phenomenal engagement farmer. If people know that term, like he is able to spark controversy and debate and get people mad at him. I don't think I've ever seen Sam Altman cuss online or on Twitter. He did when responding to Gary Marcus once. He's like, Gary, that's BS. It's just, I was like, well, okay. So he gets to Sam Altman. So, I think he's got some good points, but I just keep that in mind that he's just like very good at stirring up the flames. We've already seen so many what they call moving goalposts in terms of like what AGI is, what AGI isn't, like what these things can do. ArcAGI themselves, they created this test and said LMs will never pass it, and we're going to give $1 million to people that are able to pass it. And of course, that got beaten, within the last year or so. So they created ArcAGI 2, and now there's ArcAGI 3, right? So, and I'm not blaming them, by the way. I don't want them to just put up their hands and say, okay, AGI achieved, like that's a great benchmark. They should continue just putting out the benchmark. Like what they're doing is perfect. I'm not criticizing them in any way. But the point is, at some point, their benchmark is going to be so far beyond like human understanding You know what I mean? Like, are we still going to be calling it like AGI, like when we can't understand what it's, you know what I mean, what the solutions are? I think Ethan Mollick says it really well. He says AGI progress is a jagged frontier, meaning that to us, if we think about, there's some things like we think as equal difficulty, but for these models, there might be things that they're superhuman at, and then they'll fail at something that we considered trivial, right? So they can't count the number of R's in strawberry, but they're able to, the AlphaVolve model optimize the Google data centers to where they optimized it and improved them by 3%. And that was rolled out and it's been in effect for a year plus now. So I don't know how many millions of dollars that saves Google, but it's got to be a lot, maybe tens of millions. I have no idea. But I mean, think about the scale of that. And that was just one of the results. They've also optimized a lot of other things. So I'm curious, like exactly what you're saying is like in the future, like imagine if this continues and these models are solving cancer, creating, waste-free energy that's perfectly environmentally friendly, that's cheap and abundant. Like they're just solving the biggest problems humanity has, but they're still failing really simple tasks. Like they still can't count the number of R's in strawberry. Like at what point do we go, yeah, no, this is super intelligence. Yes, I know it can't count the number of R's in strawberry. I get it. But guess what? It's we're living forever and there's no scarcity. And like, do you know what I mean? Like if at its worst, it's really stupid, but at its best, it's superhuman. Does that mean it's stupid or is it superhuman intelligence? You know what I mean? So I guess, I don't think Gary Marcus will, as long as he can point to something, he's never going to give up.
That's very human. So I guess maybe when artificial intelligence can move goalposts like Gary Marcus, then we'll be able to say it has finally reached AGI. Yeah.
Well, can I show you an image that he reposted and said, AGI is here? He was being sarcastic. But I thought it's a little bit slightly not safe for work, so feel free to cut this out. But so somebody asked ChatGPT if they want a diagram of what's going on inside.
Yeah, I saw this.
Did you see this?
Yes.
Oh my God. Let me see how I can get it up on the screen. So this is the image that ChatGPT wrote, created. So I tried to replicate it. It does get it horribly wrong. But this image, like just the more you look at it and see what's labeled, what's not labeled, what is labeled, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
It's a very unnatural combination of anatomy.
It's just like that's not how any of this works. So anyways, so
this is the ultimate end state of the woke utopia that people would like very much to exist.
Yes. There's a lot here that I think everybody will have a problem with, no matter what side of the curve you are on. But that's so yes. So as long as it makes mistakes like this and other mistakes, like we will never say that it's like superhuman. But at the same time, and I don't have an image for this. Yeah, but I think the other day there was this image where there was this maze that's written out on a page that is very complicated. Like I could not in my life be able to trace it to get to the center to get out. I uploaded to O4 Mini and it cracks it. It cracks those Tower of Hanoi problems because it can write code to do it, and like no matter how complicated it is, it's able to solve it. So it creates its own tools to solve problems. And with time, that's just going to keep getting better and better. And, I don't know. It's hard for me to dismiss that. I mean, some people are saying that it's like bad or whatever, but we've obviously created something interesting, something that's going to be huge. It's not perfect yet, but I mean, if you just look at the progress, you gotta be a little bit in awe of it.
Yeah, it is crazy, and especially the way that it can use tools. I mean, up until this past year, I was thinking about, artificial intelligence as probabilistic compute, and then like traditional computing is deterministic compute. And like these two things are independent and separate. And I guess, maybe they are, but it almost seems like using RL that you can put the deterministic compute through tool use into the training process of the probabilistic compute and make deterministic compute literally a subset of probabilistic compute. And if that's true, like it really is the synthesis of, two vastly different ways of processing information that have been coexisting, for the last 60 years, into something that is unimaginably powerful.
Yeah, and I mean that's my issue with you might have heard the Apple paper that said reasoning is an illusion. And then when I was talking about it, also Gary Marcus actually commented on one of my posts on X, saying, yeah, but it's using like, I forget the terminology that he used, but you said like these deterministic tools, basically software, right? Tool calls, etc. And in the Apple paper, for those people that are not familiar, so it was out of Apple, the Apple, and it was titled something like The Illusion of Reasoning. And they wanted for these large language models to do various complicated reasoning tasks. Let me pull one of them up right now. So I think most people are familiar with this. Maybe I wasn't like maybe not by name, but people have seen it, right? These little stacking blocks. It's called the Tower of Hanoi. And so the idea is that you take the top one, you transfer, then the second one, etc. And the rule is, I believe, you can't have a bigger one on top of a smaller one at any given point, right? So as you can imagine, there's a very specific order in which you have to do it, right? So here you take the red, the smallest one, you put it here, then the white one in the center, then you're able to put the red one here, then you're able to put the green one here. So you see how it's like a meticulous process to get it there. So this we can probably, most of us can figure it out, right? But imagine when we increase the number of disks to 4, 5, 6, 7, right? By the time you get to 10, the number of moves you have to make is in the thousands, or maybe even like the tens of thousands. I don't recall the exact numbers, but it's a lot, right? So it's quite a bit. And so
they all have to be correct.
And they all have to be correct, yeah. And so the researchers asked these models to do it. And they found a couple things. One of them, like, strangely, past a certain point of disks, right? So as these challenges increase in complexity, the models, they don't spend as much time thinking about it. They just come up with a different, like a more general solution. And it's like, well, yeah, so do humans. Like, if I give you like an impossible problem, are you going to start thinking about it and just think about it for an hour? Or are you going to realize that, hey, that seems like a complicated problem. I'm not going to start, I'll see maybe if there's a solution, or maybe there's a tool I can use, or so, right? So you sort of, before you start thinking about it, you kind of just estimate, like, will I be able to solve it in my head right now? And if not, you don't start thinking about it, so to speak, right? Whereas a simple problem, you might, like if I say 2 + 2, people will answer. 10 + 10, you'll answer. Square root of, quadrillion, you're not going to start thinking about it. You're like, I can't solve that. And so the models work the same way. They don't try to solve it in their context window, so sort of just by thinking about it. So when that paper came out, I mean, my question was like, I was like, okay, but I took the question, the most complicated example from the paper. I just copied it from the actual paper, and I posted it into Gemini 2.5 Pro, and I was like, solve it. And, guess what Gemini 2.5 Pro did, right? It created a little script, a little visualizer, right? For which, I guess, Python or whatever, I forget what coding language it used, but it created like a little visualizer, and with sliders. So you can set how many disks you wanted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you say, okay, I wanted to have 10 disks, and then you click solve, And you would see in fast forward, quickly moving these blocks around to get it to the final thing, right? And I posted online. It went a little bit viral, and people are complaining. There's like, but that's not fair because that's it made a tool. It coded up a tool to solve the problem, and everybody was like upset. Half the people are upset, half the people are like happy. But it's such a weird thing to me to think about because, like, think about going back 10 years in the past and trying to explain what's happening to somebody. You're like, we're trying to figure out if these machines, if they can think, if they can reason, right? First of all, that's the person would be like, what are you talking about? Like, if it can think of it, like, yeah. So like, how are you testing it? Well, we keep giving these highly complicated problems and it refuses to do them because it realizes they're too complex, but it can create a tool to solve it. Like, it can create software to solve that problem easily. And we're just wondering if that's cheating or not. Like, is it cheating by writing software to solve a problem that we gave it? Like, think about telling that to somebody 10 years, they'd be like,
well, like,
what?
Count the number of mathematicians in the world who have solved how to solve that problem without using software. Like,
yeah. And it like just brings the question is like, okay, so we're saying that making tools is not a sign of intelligence anymore, right? You have to do it brute force. And if you make a tool, that can't be intelligent. Like at what point, like, you see how like wild this discussion is. Like, it's making tools.
I thought the whole thing
problems.
that separated humans from everybody else was that we made tools.
Yeah. But somehow we are refusing to say that that's an intelligent way to solve the problem. So just a lot of this stuff is very bizarre because I feel like, and when the most recent one, the MIT study where they said 95% of AI projects fail in enterprises. I looked at the study.
If everyone hasn't heard your episode debunking the popular reaction to that yet, they need to stop this. They need to go to your channel. They need to watch your video. It is titled
MIT Viral Study Debunked, I think. But it's funny because every single person that covered that, everybody had a different understanding. The paper is so poorly written. That's number one. I think it's so hard to understand what the point was, what their numbers were. It's so the opposite of what I think the findings were. How the various newspapers and publications, how they're interpreting it is just so backwards.
I really, just to give viewers a quick overview, like your takeaway from the video is that contrary to the headlines, the majority of businesses and especially the majority of employees that are trying something with AI are seeing positive ROI and they're adopting it and they're adopting it more. That there's a small subset of stuff that people are trying that's not working. Even that, is like a quarter of the things succeed, not 5%, 1 in 20. And that, it's obviously taking up, a huge portion of what's driving productivity gains right now. And then, especially the stat that you shared about 90% of employees are using AI tools, whether they're allowed to or not, to do their work. Yeah. That's huge.
That's very telling. Even if they have to pay for it themselves, not the company, even if the IT department has some regulations against using, like they call it the shadow AI, these people just using large language models to automate portions of their work. Even if it's going to get them in trouble, even if they have to pay out of pocket for it, they still do it. 90% of employees. I mean, to me, that's really the striking statistic that people need to be paying attention to is what percentage of the people, how diffused it is through everybody that's working to the point where like they need this to work, or not need it, but they just like, they feel like they do, they want to have it. And
especially when you combine that with the chart from OpenAI that showed their token output, correlated to the end of the summer. So it's like, okay, I had seen that and people are like, well, OpenAI's whole business is just dependent on students. I'm like, yeah, well, those students are going to grow up and this is how they're going to do everything that they do moving forward.
Yep.
So that's kind of actually a big deal. Oh, but then when you combine that with, and 90% of the people that are actually working in these knowledge work fields are also heavily relying on this technology and you realize that it's already gobbled up 100% market share essentially, and it's just like the maturity of the use cases that has yet to develop, not penetrating the users.
Yeah, and it does seem like there are a lot of snake oil salesmen, people that are making a lot of money selling enterprise solutions or solutions to businesses that are using AI as the latest sort of marketing term. And so when people are interacting with that and seeing that, they form this opinion about AI, like, oh, it's bad, it doesn't work. It's like, no, they're just using that term to sell overpriced enterprise software. One of in the study, there was one corporate lawyer that said that they've purchased a $50,000 contract review AI, and it was so bad that she keeps resorting to using ChatGPT to review the contracts, right? So just think about that. $50,000 software is bad. $20 a month software kills it, right? So, you know what I mean? Like, if you're interacting with one, you have a very bad opinion of AI. If you're interacting with the other, you're like, this thing is amazing. So yeah.
Well, and if the OpenAI version didn't exist, I'll bet you that $50,000 one would actually be good. It would probably be even worth the ROI if she has a big enough firm. It's like, it is, I guess, somewhat hard to say. Maybe it doesn't actually save anyone time, that it causes more work than it saves. So it's possible, but it's also possible that it does save time. It just doesn't save as much time as ChatGPT. And then, yeah, especially at those price points, then obviously it's not going to make sense.
Yeah, and they have a few case studies that show. So the 5%, my understanding, and again, it's such how they show the math, how they show the data is so weird and so backward. It's so hard to tell what's what. And they don't just list out all of their data points. They present them in this weird way. To me, it seems like what they're saying is that 5% of the companies that they've investigated, interviewed, 5% of them have implemented an AI project that has shown some ROI and that they've decided to keep. And they gave examples. Especially, they're noticing that for the back office work, these projects are saving tons of money. So, for example, one company was able to cut by 30% their spend on I'm guessing a marketing agency, so something that does content and various graphic design. Company's been able to cut $10,000 in annual expenses by it's either customer service or document review, something like that. There's another company that saved millions of dollars on. Sorry, the previous day I said 10 million, I believe. So, sorry if I said that incorrectly. So they said saved 10 million annually. Another company said saved 2 million annually on, because ChatGPT could, or whatever that program was, would able to do risk analysis very, very effectively. So a lot of their, what they call BPOs, so business processes outsourcing. So if you're hiring somebody else to do it, AI replaces those BPOs, saving tens of millions of dollars. To me, that should have been the headline, but it wasn't. And it's weird. It's almost like an anti-AI bias there, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think that we have been at a little bit of, the hype cycle peak recently about how fast some of these things are going to produce, this huge transformative AI. And so I think, my read of the public reaction to that paper is more about the fact that, yeah, this might take a couple extra years compared to what Sam Altman was saying 12 months ago. And that, yeah, people are just like, this is the excuse that people are latching onto to say, oh my gosh, it's not happening 6 months from now or 12 months from now. But yeah, the overall trend is still in place. There's still lots of things. And yeah, just like diffusion takes longer. And I guess in some ways, Palantir just hasn't reached enough customers yet.
Yeah, Palantir is interesting, and it's kind of shrouded in secrecy. I think those are your words. So yeah, it will be very interesting to to know where we go from here. It's so close to the government. Yeah, and the other thing about, and I agree with you that it's like one of those things where it's like people's perception of AI is maybe overblown, or it's going to take a few more years, which is, by the way, good. It's good for AI safety. It's good for how quickly society has to deal with a lot of these changes. Like, I hope it takes a little bit longer. You know what I mean? That there's no problem with that. And a lot of people are, a lot of publications are saying, it's the AI bubble. And it's weird because I think that what words we use matter. I mean, what is a bubble? So the housing bubble back in the days, the .com bubble back in the days, like all the .coms that survived are the biggest companies now, Microsoft and Google and Meta and all of them. So it's not like because there was a tech bubble that these companies are worthless. They're worth more than anything else. It's just our expectations got a little, carried away. And also, if you have a house, having a house is still nice, even though there was the housing bubble. Like, a bubble, I think, doesn't mean what people think it means. You know what I mean? It's like that, you keep using that word. I don't think, I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Inconceivable.
Yeah, inconceivable. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, yeah, maybe there is a bubble. Who cares? That doesn't mean that AI is not gonna impact every aspect of our lives. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe it'll take 5-10 years. That's fine. But an AI bubble is just it's like a finance thing. Like, we overpaid because we got too excited. It's like, fine, but the underlying thing is still, like, a house is still valuable. Google is still valuable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are going to be some people that speculated who lost some money, but that doesn't mean that the overall thing is wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen some people. So the person that talks to Dave Lee on his podcast, I forget his name, but he used call options back in the
Emmett
days.
Peppers?
Yes, Emmett Peppers. Wow. So he used call options to make in 2020, I think, like 20 million
It
on
was
Tesla.
a lot.
Some insane.
Yeah.
I don't think he started
and it was
out.
all around the S&P 500 inclusion. And he had been playing options in Tesla since 2013. And so I think he made a whole bunch of money in options in 2013. And then had lost the majority of the money that he had made in options from 2013 to 2020, and then got the S&P 500 inclusion massively right. And
Oh man. Yeah.
created
And I mean,
giant leg up.
Oh yeah. That's absolutely phenomenal. It's very exciting. I'm very impressed by it. But to me, like, I try not to, I've messed around with investing like that, with trading, with call options. But to me, like, I always get back to, I don't know, like the spirit of, what's his name, Warren Buffett. Like, he's just like, just buy great companies and then don't sell. And I think that with AI, that's going to be even more important if you're able to get the companies that end up compounding, because AI is going to be a very great leverage. So if you just pick up the winners, so you don't even have to just get the one or two, just get a broad, and this is not financial advice. This is just what I do. If I can get a few of those that are going to keep compounding, I'm happy. And I just want to have, great company. I usually use index funds, so I don't even do stock picking that much. But for the people that are paying attention to this stuff, it might cloud your judgment, because the pricing of the companies is very different from AI progress. It's not one of the same, right? There could be a bubble in the financial markets and completely normal progress in AI that hasn't changed. So one and the other are not the same.
So maybe this is a good place to kind of tie things up in a bow for, like, it. I'll ask, if you had $1 million that someone gave to you and put a gun to your head and said, okay, you have to allocate this to the main players that are trying to develop artificial general intelligence right now. So, like, you don't get to play the picks and shovels play, no Palantir, no NVIDIA, no AMD, none of these people. You've got to stick with the Anthropics, and you can invest in private companies. So X.AI, Google, Anthropic, Safe Superintelligence, Thinking Machines. And then you could even include the category of Chinese open source, like who are all the players that you have to invest in and what's your percentage allocation to each?
Oh, yeah. Wow. So, I mean, to me, it completely shifts if you say can invest in the private companies. That's a whole different ball game, although I have no idea how they're valued, I guess. So maybe that's another point to consider.
Just thinking about it as like percentage chance at success. We don't have to worry too much. Like we'll just say that whoever wins, growth is going to make current valuations irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, I would just do a basket of all the top frontier labs. I don't know if I would include the small ones. So I guess my first sort of gut feeling is just do, Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, X.AI. This is horrible. I probably wouldn't bet on Meta. I don't know why. I don't know. They got Alexander Wang, who's obviously pretty sharp, but he doesn't have a huge background in machine learning. He's just, but there's something there. There's definitely intelligence there, and there's definitely.
I'm going to send this to Jan LeCun, and he's going to be highly offended.
Oh, but yeah, and what's happening with Jan? Like, I feel like Jan is slowly kind of getting pushed to the side. I don't know. Like Jan, if he's right in 10 years, we're going to know he's right. It would be like, oh, he was right all along. Maybe.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I have no idea. I mean, I tried to understand his JEPA thing. It makes sense, but I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand it enough to make a judgment call on it. But this is the LLM's moment, and there seems to be a lot of applications, and we can just see this happening. You know what I mean? So maybe those four, not Meta, and then
weight.
I think that in one of the baskets, I would just do that and just leave it at that, because I feel like that's going to give you, like, I don't see, I see one of them winning hugely. You know what I mean? Can I guess which one? The weird thing about Google is how much money it makes from search and from all of that stuff. And I feel like AI kind of replaces that model. So it's like, can they kill the golden goose and like create another golden goose? It's kind of hard to know. But if I could get Anthropic, OpenAI, X.AI, and DeepMind, let's say, if I could invest in DeepMind without investing in Alphabet, I think I would 100% do that. Although, it's kind of hard to. Or like isomorphic labs, stuff like that. Chinese companies is super weird because of just the interaction with the governments. So I don't even know how you would sort of bet on that. And then they would really depend on GPUs, if they're able to get GPUs or not. And then SSI and the thinking machines, I have no idea what they're doing. So I guess if they give me a pitch, I could decide based on that. But I wouldn't bet just from, Same thing with Palantir. If I knew
no
more.
Vibes bets.
I mean, I believe in, Ilya is obviously one of the sort of the big names in the space, obviously knows his stuff. What can he do on his own with whatever investment he's getting? It still seems like a long shot, doesn't it? Like,
yeah. I mean, it's obviously a huge bet on algorithms over everything.
Yeah.
I guess you could say, talent and algorithms. Like, they believe they have some special talent. They believe they have some special algorithms. But, I guess referencing back to the video, which I don't know if it's public. Can people watch your interview with Karen from Noose Research?
Yes. So great question. Thank you for that. So what happened was we published it for whatever reason. I don't know why. It was maybe a little bit earlier on in our interviews. It just, YouTube was like, get this out of here. It just did not give any love, did not send it any traffic. So I delisted it, and I just kept meaning to relist it, like brand new, relaunch it, maybe change the intro up a little bit, because it was such a good interview. It was,
gosh, it was absolutely incredible. And I was able to find it just through a Perplexity search because you had mentioned it. And so thankfully, even Perplexity was able to land me on your unlisted video.
Oh, that's
but oh
good
my
to know.
gosh,
Okay.
it was incredible.
Yes. So let me actually today, I guess I'll do it as soon as possible. I'll try to relist it, get it back up and running because, and I can't talk about it, but I can't talk about the details. I think News Research has something cooking that we're going to see. Probably by the time you publish this, people already are going to know about it. But they have some new stuff cooking, so maybe I'll just kind of relaunch the News Research. Yeah, we talked to one of their model behavior specialists. I forget the exact sort of title, but oh boy, does it go deep, because it's like LLM understanding what goes on in that brain is like its own psychology, so to speak. But for AI, we go into some crazy rabbit holes that are just absolutely fascinating. And I really enjoyed that chat. I hope to bring it to a much wider audience. Yeah.
Well, the reason that I brought it up was because, the point that Karen made that was so good is just how, all of these major players that we're specifically talking about, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and X.AI, they're all coalesced around a specific way to continue to make progress because they're continuing to see ROI on this method, and that there's so many potential pathways that are completely unexplored. And so, that's obviously Ilya's shot on goal, is like maybe one of these unexplored paths is equally viable and requires, is much less resource intensive.
Yeah, I'd be, again, so curious to know what he's got cooking because, like you said, like a lot of these companies, they are product companies. They have investors, they have their P&L sheets, whatever. Ilya said, no products, no checkpoints, no announcements. He said it's a straight shot to super intelligence, right? So he opens up a lab, collects whatever billions of dollars in funding, and then you don't hear from him. So no product releases, nothing like that until he goes, oh, here's super intelligence. That's the one product, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
product.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it. He's not going to be pushed around by market forces, by investors, whatever. So, I mean, that's huge if you can make it work, obviously. But I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. You know what I mean? It's hard to gauge how realistic that is.
Yeah.
I trust him a lot, obviously.
Yeah. Definitely the type of thing, if I had the opportunity, that I would put, 1 or 2% of my net worth in. Like, it's probably going to go to zero, but if it doesn't, holy smokes.
Yeah. I'd love to put some. If we're gambling on various cryptocurrencies, I'd much rather bet on these AI labs, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll just rank my bet, and I think, Casey Hanmer had a great interview on the Dwarkesh pod, and he just talked about Elon's unique ability to reach further into the full supply chain and bottlenecks anywhere and everywhere that they might arise. And I think that was a really great podcast, but that was specifically a very good point that I have an incredible amount of respect right now for Demis Hassabis and in his approach. I think as, science, like pure scientist first, I think that has some incredible potential. I would put the majority of my allocation between Demis and Elon. And then, so maybe do probably 80% and split it, or maybe 70%, 40% to Google. 40% to Elon and X.AI, 30% to Google DeepMind. So that leaves me with 30 to kind of spread around. And I think I share your sentiment about Mark Zuckerberg. I think they're going to make money. I think they're going to do well. I don't think I'm going to bet on them to actually cross the finish line first. I
Right.
think I would put probably 20% of the rest of my money towards Chinese open source, not knowing exactly how that would work, but like I think there's a good solid 20% chance at least, and maybe probably more than that, honestly, that Chinese open source actually ends up dominating. But I would like to have my, hopefully, bet that the United States is the one that crosses first. And then, yeah, I'd probably split 10% up between things like the safe superintelligence, thinking machines, and yeah, just kind of a smattering of other small, I really like to watch what Guillaume Verdon is doing with the thermodynamic compute, follow George Hotz closely and Tiny Grad. And I think that those types of things, plus what Noose Research is doing, like there's just so much of these unexplored avenues that I think, especially if you could combine a couple of them together, could explode into something incredible too. So
Yeah, as you're talking about it, I realized I probably, if I had more time to think about it, my answer would be very different, because a bunch of these AI tools that I've been using for a while keep getting scooped up. So I feel like it's like whatever I'm using, I should have like a little bucket that's has a small. So Magnific AI got acquired, I think. I've been using Midjourney for as long as it's been around, I think, since they were in Discord. They just got scooped up by Meta, or partnered with Meta. So it's like, and there's been other examples, but like just whatever, I would look at like my tool usage, like what AI tools I use, and be like, okay, just let's do like a little bucket, like 30%. Let's just split them across all of these ones. And yeah, like you said, Meta's going to make money. I fully expect them to make money. I think they're going into the direction of that. Have you seen the little thing where it's like the talk to your stepmom, and it's like this young woman in a dress, whatever. They have their little. I think they're going to do those character AIs, right? So where people can talk to it, and I'm sure they're going to make tons of money, sell tons of ads. I don't know if they're going to develop like the thing that changes the world. I think they're going to develop a highly entertaining thing that keeps people engaged, and they're going to make a lot of money. Like I have no doubt about that. So,
yeah, yep, I think I would agree. Well, perfect. I mean, do you want a second to just reevaluate because I did put you kind of on the spot. If you want some time to.
Oh, well, I would just I would just say exactly what I did there. What I would do, the only thing I would change is I would just like make everything proportionally smaller, create like a 30% bucket that's an index fund of all of those small AI tools. I would throw Midjourney, Magnific, HeyGen.
Gotcha.
11 Labs.
So that's 30%, and then the other 4 kind of split evenly between the remaining 70%.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for spending this time with me today, Wes. Really, really appreciate your time, and really appreciate all of the work that you do to make AI more accessible to a much broader audience, especially like it is really hard to understand the papers that come out in AI. And so this is a huge public service that you do to help people understand those better if they'd like to. And yeah, so obviously people can check out you at your YouTube channel at Wes Roth, on X at Wes Roth. They should also go check out Dylan Curious on both X and YouTube as well. Are there any other places that you want people to be able to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, we just launched the podcast, Wes and Dylan. So we just interviewed Nick Bostrom. That's the other thing that we're doing together, a little co-op project, I guess. But yeah, yes. And yeah, thank you so much for having us here. Dylan had to go early, but yeah, great, chatting with the three of you. And yeah, I loved it. Very excited about seeing this go live. And thank you so much for having us on.
Awesome. We'll